You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box, where we're not afraid to ask anything. So ask away. We're here to tackle your tough questions. Addiction hurts everyone within a family. Today's question comes from someone who wants to help an addicted sibling, but has no idea how. My guest, therapist Kathy Kinghorn, has spent much of her career working with addiction and people who use. She presents on these issues around the country and works with people who use both individually and in groups. I can't wait to get to her insights on this question. Kathy, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So Kathy, tell us a little bit about you. What got you started down the path of helping people with addiction?
It was not my first choice, Lindsay. I started as a therapist and I was working with children and I loved it. They're just, to see them, the resilience and how they're able to make changes, and they're so heroic. Our little ones are just so heroic.
Absolutely.
And then I started wondering about different, who can I help? And addiction was honestly last on my list. Mm-hmm. I hadn't even thought about working with addiction. So it was pretty surprising to me when I came about, and I started in about 2009, and I heard the word sexual addiction and I was like, what? People, what? They can get addicted to sex? And my first job, they specialized in it. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to work with this population, I'm going to figure out everything there is in literature, in real life about sexual addiction. And the more I went down that path, the more I fell in love with helping individuals with behavioral addictions, which is sexual addiction is simply a behavioral addiction. And I just found I had a knack for it. I could really love the individual with the addiction and love the betrayed who's experiencing that trauma. So it's been a powerful journey for me.
I love that. It seems like it's a really important thing to not just love the person with the addiction, but also the person on the other side of it too.
Yeah, when I was started out, it surprised me, but over time I've heard it enough. The partner will come in and she goes, I know you care about my husband. I don't want him seeing somebody that sees him as a monster. And I thought, well, how else could you move as a therapist? But the truth is there are some, therapists that aren't able for lots of different reasons to see both parties as human and as individuals who are, we're all in this together. So it was the partner that brought it to my attention, my love and care for the one struggling with an addiction.
Really interesting. It goes to show that even with a partner with an addiction, that there's a lot of love there, which is also why it's incredibly painful, both for the addicted party and the one that has been betrayed or that is loving that person that's addicted. So let's just jump right into our listener question. And this is about a brother who is an alcoholic. So we'll just jump right in. The question is, my brother has been an alcoholic for the last 15 years. He has bled my parents dry, emotionally, physically, and financially. I'm so sick of the cycle and what it does to them, but I also understand that they just can't give up on him. I personally feel like he needs to hit rock bottom and then they come in and save him every time he gets close. But I'm not an expert on this stuff. Is there anything I can do to help my parents or help him that won't just be a waste of time and money? So this is a tough one, Kathy. You can see, like we talked about, there's a lot of love here and a lot of frustration, which I'm sure people that love addicted partners or siblings or someone in their lives, there's probably a lot of both of those feelings. So yeah, where do you want to start with this?
Wow. What I heard in that question, Lindsay, is a family that they're all moving in fear. That addicted brother is fearful that he won't be able to get to his addiction. The parents are fearful that if they don't support him financially, that they'll lose him. The person writing the question believes that he's fearful that maybe he's fearful his inheritance is just going down the toilet, or he's just fearful that the emotional toll that's being taken on his parents is just so painful to watch. But you've got a family in fear.
I can see that there's a lot of fear that's going on. So when you have everybody that's in fear for different reasons, how are we going to move forward? What do you do about that?
I think that most people, if you said, well, like, what's the opposite of fear? Likely you're going to hear courage, to just be courageous, which comes from a different part of our brain, by the way. But I would argue that the opposite of fear is curiosity. Fear moves us away from things. And it's a great emotion in certain situations. We should be fearful about stepping out in the street. We should be fearful about somebody that calls us that says, hey, have I got a deal for you? We should move away. But what curiosity does is it moves you towards seeing the other person. Now, that might also mean I'm seeing them clearer and I need to physically or financially or emotionally move away from them. But curiosity allows you a vantage point of seeing somebody.
That's really interesting. So why is that not our knee-jerk response? Why do we go straight to fear and not to curiosity? Because it seems so much more fruitful to be in a place of curiosity.
Yeah, it really does. But again, if you just look at this family dynamic, somewhere along the line, this family started moving collectively in fear. It sounds like, right? When we just have the tip of the iceberg. But here's a guess, is that maybe the parents feel like if my children are looking like they're failing at life, I've failed as a parent. I can't tolerate that. I cannot. I've put everything into parenting. It's my life. It's what I believe is my calling, or however they want to describe it. So the fear just goes off the charts. If we feel like we're failing in the area that means the very most to us, relationships. And this person that wrote in, that's fearing that his parents are getting financially drained, somewhere along the line, he may have watched people not take advice or not do things that are healthy, but for whatever reason, his I think if we had the real vinyl lettering on the walls in our houses, it would look totally different. So maybe his vinyl lettering was, don't make a scene. Don't point out failure. You can't do that. Don't rock the boat. So he gets amped up with, I have to do something and I have to do something now. And that old belief of don't rock the boat, don't upset mom and dad comes in. And so he's running with the gas pedal and the brakes all the time. And it's exhausting. And the one with the addiction, he has a belief that reality is just too challenging. It's too much. I'm out. And he didn't start that way. The first time he got into alcohol, he just liked the feeling. That was it. It was like, I like the feeling. But that liking turned into a full-blown addiction.
It's really interesting when you use that analogy, the gas and the brake are being pushed both at the same time. I mean, I can see that. Like, it's all the way in and I'm all the way out. And so I'm not going anywhere. Another thing you said I thought was really interesting is it's a full blown, it started out liking something, but it becomes a full blown addiction, right? And often an addiction doesn't just happen out of the blue. It's trying to mask something, or it's trying to meet a need, right? So that's when I start to wonder, does that help to get to what's the real need? What's really going on here? Because the alcohol is just a symptom, right? I mean, this is it's like we've got a cold and we're coughing, so we can treat that, but we have a virus underneath that's really going on here. So I'm just curious, how would you handle that piece of it to really get to the root of what's going on?
Well, if they were able to get him into a counseling situation, first of all, we would just teach him skills to move away from the alcohol. right? The first part is just keeping yourself safe. But I really believe you have to get farther from the want of your addiction to get to that why of your addiction. So the first steps are, hey, you're responsible for your safety plan. It's not mom and dad. It's not your 12-step buddy. It's not me. What will keep you safe? And Lindsay, when I ask my clients, what do you know you need to do to keep yourself safe? That's a question they know the answer to. They'll say, I need to not drive to Salt Lake after 6 p.m. If I go that way, I know I'm hitting the liquor store. I know it. They immediately know what will keep them safe. There's a lot of questions they don't know the answer to. That's one that if you give them a minute, they will know the answer.
Why is that? Why is that they know the answer? You're saying they actually know the answer. So when you say that, it gives actually our listener, I wonder if that gives them a calming, like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't up to me. Maybe it's not my job to solve this and manage mom and dad and the addicted brother. But maybe, like you're saying, maybe he knows inside all along what he needs.
Yeah, I think it's if you can see him as not just this person that's destroying the family, right? You've got to look at, how do I really see this sibling? What can I see? And really, what am I not seeing? And so if you're going to move towards him and he's going to have any sort of open conversation about anything, he first needs to feel seen.
Okay. Absolutely. Like if she's going to try to come in bulldozing, that's probably not going to change, right? Not going to change anything. One of the things I've heard too in therapy, as a therapist, I've heard, the biggest predictor of change is the person's willingness to change, if they actually want to change. So no amount of coercion or trying to manage this brother to change is really going to get him to change until he really wants to. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, and a good question for that, if you can answer it, if you can ask it in all sincerity, what does it feel like when you're 20 minutes away from getting your first drink of the day? And if you're coming from a curiosity standpoint and you really hear them talk about it, they'll say, it just calms me. I mean, it calms me like nothing else just to know it's coming. In fact, I can deal with so much more when I know I've got that to go to. Now, a lot of false beliefs there, right? But don't worry about that. It is true that it allows them some pause and it allows them some comfort. And they're so bereft of comfort. And so when you get to really see what this addiction represents to them, what it really feels like, and what I like to say is just keep asking those kind of sincere questions. Don't ask them like you're an interrogator or a journalist ready to write a story. Ask as you would about somebody that, I've always been curious how mountains were formed. I'm just curious. Does anything in my life depend on that? Absolutely not. So move in curiosity with them. And if it's true, they're going to resonate with that felt experience that you're starting to see them. And they're going to tell you a lot more. The more you stay with it, you're going to have an understanding of alcoholism like you've never had before.
That feels so compassionate and loving. Because when you're talking about it that way, it makes me think, oh, that is a place of love. That motive stems from love, not fear, not I'm going to, bulldoze you to change, but like, I really want to understand what's going on for you. Help me to see what is going on because something's going on here. And when you said you'll understand it more than you ever had before, it makes me go back to, thinking that love is what helps people to change. And when you're staying in a place of curiosity, that feels like the motive is not fear driven, but it's really a place of, I love you, I care about you, and help me to understand this.
Right. And the same applies with mom and dad. Just sitting with them and saying, what does it say about you that you've got a child with an addiction? And let them sit with that. Now they might try to put up well, I don't think it says anything about me, but somewhere it does, or they wouldn't be rescuing him. So don't worry about maybe the first few comments, or maybe they'll just come out and say it. Well, I failed as a parent. And you share with them, I want you to know, I'm thinking of 10 ways you haven't failed. Can I share those with you? And speak from your childhood experience. My parents were amazing, and they were absolutely both emotionally shut down. But in all honesty, I could say, you taught me right and wrong. You taught me how to be a hard worker. You taught me loyalty between a man and a woman. You taught me so many things that are endearing principles I live by today. Thank you. And can you see how that reminds them of the things that they did? Just because this son has chosen alcoholism, it doesn't mean that those principles are not still somewhere in him. And because they're in him, the shame can be so intense, right? The dissonance, the disconnect between those two can further distance him from what he really needs is the support and love.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say too is getting curious about your own experience. Like, what is this sister experiencing with her parents? And what's the frustration for her? What are the parents? What does this alcoholic son say about me? Right? It's really coming back to doing some of our own work, even though we're saying he's the identified patient, right? Wait a minute, let's turn it around and look at ourselves and say, okay, what's so hard and painful about this for me? And maybe it's, what does this say about me? So I also loved when you said, my parents were emotionally shut down and they were incredibly loyal and they taught me to work hard. And I think there's space for the and, right? It's not just you're good or you're bad, or you did it right or you did it wrong. But you know what? We're all messy and we're all figuring this out and we're all doing it for the first time, a lot of us, right? And as you said that, I thought, gosh, there's, instead of the or, thinking about the and, that there's space for the and, that we're all really muddling our way through some of these things, and some are more obvious than others, but holding space for that and, not just you're one way or the other, right? So, as I hear that, I keep thinking about, I'm hearing a lot of love. Can you tell me, a couple of things I've heard is how do you love someone that's addicted? And I've heard two things: love and boundaries. And yet sometimes boundaries does not feel loving. So can you tell me, do you agree with that love and boundaries feel like that's a winning combination? And how can you be loving and be boundaried?
I think a better question is, how could you be loving and not boundaried? Because love really is about, a component of it is boundaries, So I don't think you can, for love, if love's there, boundaries exist.
So why do boundaries get such a bad rap? Because I feel like especially, it's almost like something I feel like people make fun of in the therapy world, like, oh, it's boundaries, bring up your boundary. Why do they get a bad rap? Because I agree with you. Being boundaried is the most loving thing you can do. Why doesn't it always come across that way?
Well, and we're going to talk about that in our next podcast a little bit more. But I think they do have such a negative connotation because it feels like put up a wall. We have borders with boundaries, right? That's our boundaries. And so it feels like a negative connotation. But if we look at it from a framework of a positive, here's where I end and here's where you begin. And that's a much safer approach. But when families are reactive to each other, they don't know where somebody ends and they begin. So if that alcoholic son is a part of mom and dad's story, that it's so intertwined that their story can't be rewritten without him changing, then there's no hope for boundaries.
That makes so much sense. The hope for changing, right? That's where, then there's room for boundaries because there's hope for change.
right?
Well, Kathy, I so appreciate your insights and the conversation around addiction. I think all of us have been affected by addiction, whether it's personally ourselves or someone we love. And so it's a conversation that I think needs to happen. And so appreciate the thoughts on curiosity and love and boundaries. And I hope this will be helpful to our listener with her brother. Yeah. If you like this episode, please share it with your friends, rate and review, and we'll see you next time.